to everyone for logging on to this video conference, and welcome yet again to this remote meeting of the Cabinet. I'm now first going to ask Paul Robinson, our Democratic Services Officer, to announce the housekeeping arrangements, and then subsequently each Cabinet member in turn to introduce themselves. So over to you first, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I am Paul Robinson, the Democratic Services Officer for this meeting, and I'm assisted by my colleague Jay Bell, who is the host of the virtual meeting. Also in attendance at today's meeting are the councillors who form the Cabinet and officers of the Council, who are attending either because they are a member of the Executive Management team or will be presenting reports at the meeting. Each participant will introduce themselves when they first speak during the meeting. This meeting is a public meeting held in accordance with recent regulations which permit meetings to be held by remote means. The meeting will be live streamed for the public to view via the Public Eye platform, and Sheffield Live TV may also broadcast this meeting. The recording will also be available for people to view later through the Council's website. Public questions can be asked and petitions can be presented at Cabinet meetings. Details on how to do this are available on the Council's web pages and in the agenda papers. For this meeting, questions from 3 members of the public have been received by the submission deadline. At the appropriate time, the meeting host will bring questioners into the virtual meeting room to enable them to ask their questions. Once a public speaker has asked their questions and had an answer, the host will then return them to the virtual public gallery. Before I hand back to the Chair to proceed to introductions, I just have a few housekeeping points to mention. To make the meeting run as smoothly as possible, can I please ask participants in the virtual meeting room to have your microphone on mute when you are not speaking. When you want to speak, please physically raise your hand to the camera so that the Chair can see it. Only unmute when the Chair indicates that you can speak. If at any time any member loses the ability to hear or be heard, please alert the Chair or host as soon as possible. Finally, members of the public may see members looking away from their screens at times. This is because they will need to look at an additional screen or device containing their agenda papers. I'll now hand back to the Chair of the meeting. Thank you.
Right, thank you for that, Paul. I will now ask Cabinet members to introduce themselves. So first and foremost, I am Councillor Julie Doe, Leader of the Council and Chair of the Cabinet. Jackie?
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, everybody. My name is Councillor Jackie Drayton. I'm a councillor for Burngrave Ward and I'm the Cabinet Member for Children and Families.
Thank you. Mark?
Thank you, Julie. I'm Councillor Mark Jones. I'm the Cabinet Member for Environment, Street Scene and Climate Change.
Thank you. George?
Hi, I'm Councillor George Dundas-Hammond. I'm the Cabinet Member for Health and Social Care.
Thank you. Terry?
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Terry Fox, I'm Deputy Leader and also Cabinet Member for Finance, Resources and Governance.
Thank you. Mary?
I'm Councillor Mary Lee and I'm Cabinet Member for Culture, Parks and Leisure.
Thanks. Paul?
I'm Councillor Paul Wood. I'm the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhoods and Community Safety.
Thanks, Paul. And last but not least, Bob?
Thanks, Chair. I'm Councillor Bob Johnson, Cabinet Member for Transport and Development.
Okay, thank you for that. We have a couple of apologies, don't we, Paul?
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from Councillors Abdissam Mohammed and Mazza Iqbal.
Okay, thank you. Right, on to the main agenda. I also am aware that a member of the public wishing to raise a question today, Hannah Melia, needs to leave at 3:15. Have noted that, and just to say that I do expect that we will get beyond public questions before that time. But if it comes close to that period, I will bring Hannah in if she's not already asked her question. So item 3 is exclusion of public and press. Are there any items, Paul?
There are no items, Chair, which the public and press would be excluded.
Thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. Members, are there any items of business where you need to declare an interest? No, can't see any, so thank you for that. Item 5, previous minutes. Could we approve those previous minutes?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed, Chair.
Right, thank you. We're now on to the item 6, which is public questions and petitions. First of all, do we have any petitions at all? Not that I'm aware of.
No, Chair, we've not received any petitions in advance of the meeting. It's just the questions from the 3 members of the public that are in the gallery.
Okay, thank you very much. So, right, the first public member of the public raising the question is Mr. Russell Johnson. Mr. Johnson, would you like to join us and ask your questions, please? Mr. Johnson here, I can't see.
There.
Oh, he's there. There you are.
I needed to unmute myself, I see. I thought I was going to be unmuted by the host, but so sorry for that small delay there.
Oh, Mr. Johnson, if we knew that we could mute you on any occasion, then I'm sure you would have found that out before now.
Well, that's just what you'd done. I had to unmute myself. I'm sure not, Julie. I know how you love scrutiny and value democracy. Of course, of course. Anyway, good afternoon, Councillor Dorr and Cabinet. Thank you for allowing me to be present at your meeting today. 5 short questions. Firstly, please tell me the total cost of employing Charlie Aiden, who, as you know, was the former interim chief exec, the total costs. Simple enough, I think. Number 2, following the recent Ombudsman's report, which people will be well aware was highly critical of the council's behaviours, and before that the Forestry Commission, what reparation package is the council now considering to offer the citizens for the huge and unnecessary loss of public assets, estimated according to the CAVAT system at about £30 million for lost eco canopy services? That's question 2. What reparations is the council thinking about? Question 3, just recently, subject access requests, SARs, to the council have in some cases been requiring an inordinate length of time, far more than the 1 month, which is the norm. I mean, it is legal to apply for more, but it is most irregular. So I wonder whether the council, whether actually the leader will affirm or deny that there has been political interference in that process. Question 4, this concerns the Street Tree Archive, which was passed as a motion by council last month, and which is generally welcomed by those people who support street trees. However, in the motion, the dates given for the first and last documents are 2015 to 18. Now, clearly, to anybody who is familiar with this issue, this is a complete and utter nonsense. And if that is persisted with, then this so-called archive will have no value at all. It certainly won't deceive the Ombudsman, and this definitely won't deceive those of us who have knowledge of this subject, and therefore will be dismissed as yet another bit of SCC obfuscation, which we're very used to. That's question 4. And finally, this is on a much more positive note, Julie and Cabinet. What specific arrangements are in place or planned to use the skills and knowledge of elected members who are not in the Labour Party? There are some wonderful people, both within and without your party, who have a great deal to offer in helping our city recover from the COVID crisis and the effects of austerity over the past decade or so. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Mr. Johnson. So question 1 will be for Councillor Fox. I will respond to question 2 and 3. Councillor Mark Jones, question 4, and then back to me for question 5. So Terry, would you like to respond to question 1, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Johnson. The cost to date for the interim chief executive is 201,989.76p. That's inclusive of all agency fees. There's no accommodation, travel or other expenses. As you know, the chief executive took up office on the 6th of January 2020 and stepped down at the full council meeting on the 7th of October 2020. We're waiting for one further invoice for at the end of November for the days worked in October. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Terry. Question 2, which was regarding the LGO report. I think you've already heard me say this, but just to expand on it, the council has now produced a new street tree strategy, working in partnership with a number of stakeholders across the city, including Sheffield Tree Action Groups. What that strategy does is it outlines a joint partnership for how we will manage the city's street trees going forward. It outlines new ways of working around 6 outcomes to ensure that the city's network of street trees is well maintained and sustained for the future. And those, I think it's worth saying what those six outcomes are. They are: number 1, sustainability and carefully managing our street trees in accordance with best practice. Number 2, ensuring our street trees are more resilient through the type and age of the trees that we plant, and also how we manage the current street tree stock. Number 3, increasing the value and benefits that flow from our street trees. Number 4, contributing to a more equal distribution of urban forest across the city to promote health and well-being. Number 5, increasing street tree canopy cover. And number 6, involving the wider community in caring for and valuing street trees. So I think you can see that we've put in place a very positive way of moving forward, that collectively this council, and as you say when you talk about the positive question, where we are working with others to gain expertise and knowledge and their contributions and dedication towards this particular area, where the whole of Sheffield can benefit, Mr. Johnson. So that's question number 2. Question number 3, will the leader categorically deny political or senior officer interference in causing excessive delays in processing some subject access requests? I am not aware of the subject access request that you are referring to, or in fact, am I made aware of all freedom of information requests and subject access requests? As I'm sure you are aware that we have many FOIs and many SARs on various different matters. So if you would like to refer to myself, which specific requests you are talking to, then I'll be able to respond categorically to those. But just as a generic response is, speaking for myself, I have not interfered in any subject access requests. So I can categorically say that. If you want to raise any specific ones in response to the wider question, which is around any other interference, then I'm sure that I can investigate those. But I do not interfere in FOIs and SARs, and I know that there are many of those on various matters. So that's your answer to that. I hope that you can then further inform us of what those specifics are, and then I'm hoping that I can get a response to those. Question 4, I think Mark is going to answer that one, Mark.
So good afternoon, Mr. Johnson. Good to see you. With regards to the archive dates and such like, 2015 to 2018, I believe those dates were initially put forward in response to the Ombudsman report itself, because that's effectively the period that the Ombudsman report covered. And so releasing all the information over that period would seem appropriate. So if anything, I think those dates were an artifact of that report, as opposed to any attempt to limit information or limit transparency. I have received several presentations from members of the public about these dates and discussions as to what would go in the archive and how it would be done. So it is my intention that the archive should be as comprehensive as it can be. And though the dates of 2015 and 2018 were an artifact of the Ombudsman's report and our submissions and responses to that, I see no reason why the dates couldn't go back to 2008 or 2007 as to when the whole street renewal program was floated and applied for. I see no reason why we couldn't look to move those dates later. I will pick this up with officers and we'll look into this. It's my intention to try and get the archive set up as speedily and as quickly as we can. Once we have that archive established and populated with information, the public will be able to gain access to it. I am aware that this is acting a little bit in haste, and I understand that this may mean that we may miss things and not quite capture everything that we want to. But once the archive is established, I've no doubt that there will be opportunities for us to look at the archive and see what else needs to be done and see how it can be made better and more comprehensive. So from my part, I will continue. I will pick this up with officers and we will work to move the boundaries of this, because it doesn't seem unreasonable for this to go back. And if we are genuinely trying to learn from this, we are trying to move forward and understand that. But part of the issue is if you don't know where you started from, you can never be sure where you're going from. So it is my thoughts that we need to go right back to the very beginning of this contract and let everyone see exactly what we were hoping to achieve as an authority, both under this administration and the previous Lib Dem administration.
Thank you, Mark. Absolutely right. I'm pleased to hear that.
Thank you.
And can I also add to that as well, Mr. Johnson? I did receive a submitted written question from Isabel O'Leary at the last council. Unfortunately, Isabel couldn't be with us at the last council meeting, so she didn't get the opportunity to raise the question, which in fact was a similar question regarding the archives, and suggested her question was around the cut-off date, not just the start date. So you're suggesting it should predate 2015. I think what Isabel was asking is if it could go beyond 2018. In effect, any further correspondence or any matters regarding in relation to the street trees, etc., and the highways contract in particular could be. My response to her at that time would have been, I don't personally see why not. I agree with Mark, and I do want to put this on record. And the reason for that is I personally have nothing to hide on this issue. Right from taking office in 2011, all the decisions taken by the Labour group and cabinet members were based on the advice given by officers of the council. So I have no issues with the archives predating 2015 and potentially looking at a different cut-off date. Because as you know, I will no longer be with us in May 2021, COVID permitting and election permitting, and I don't have any problems with beyond that date any correspondence being looked at during my particular tenure.
Well, again,
so
I'm reassured by that, Julie.
Right, finally coming on to question 5, which you say is a very positive question. I actually see all questions to council as positive because we learn from what members of our public are thinking. especially, and raising issues that sometimes I have to say that we haven't thought of before. But on this particular one, I absolutely agree with you. That I agree with the complete premise of the question, that there are people beyond the cabinet, beyond Labour Group, beyond the councillors themselves as a council in our great city, that there are people that have a lot of knowledge and expertise that we want to capture and use collectively and collaboratively in the interest of Sheffield. So just on this particular one around COVID, I can just give you a few examples of what we've already done. We work with a range of stakeholders across the city. For example, the Local Resilience Forum includes all public sector providers, so it's not just the council. Of course, the expertise in the health service and in the police service and other local authorities, for example, come together just as much as public health and the council themselves. Another example was where the Business Response Group came together, a joint piece of work with many external stakeholders to look at a business recovery plan. Elected members of all parties will be undoubtedly involved in COVID agenda right throughout since March through council mechanisms, the contributions at council meetings, but also scrutiny. The scrutiny boards are scrutiny and development boards, and I know they have been looking across a range of issues, not just necessarily virus related issues, but other issues like rough sleepers, homelessness, business support and the impact of that. And all councillors cross-party are involved that. And at a local level, when you talk about local representatives as a ward representative for your ward, we did immediately in March set up the local community response teams in order to bring together the local representatives, including the voluntary sector and in many cases the public sector, to address the issues due to COVID particularly and the impact it was having on their particular wards. So those local community response teams have been critical for enabling the support out in the local communities, and all councillors are involved in those. And I'm sure if there are other areas where we would benefit from the expertise and knowledge of other stakeholders and individuals or groups of people, then absolutely they are very welcome. We're in a very, very difficult, incredibly difficult period, and any sort of contributions to helping every single individual, household, group, business, communities, etc., is so appreciated and welcome. And we've seen the way that the city's come together, and I hope that continues for many, many weeks and months going forward. And after COVID, post-COVID, there's still an awful lot of damage that's been occurred because of it, but going forward, we'll still need that expertise and knowledge of taking us forward. So thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Councillor Dawes. Very thorough answer.
You've raised some good questions there. Right, Hannah Melia, is Hannah with us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can, Hannah. Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks. So, hello, and thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. I believe that the work of the council is really important. It's the way that we as a community make sure that everyone across Sheffield has the chance to thrive. But my question today is to ask what you as a leadership committee what your plan is to restore trust and confidence in local democracy after the tree fiasco. How can Sheffielders feel confident that the council is working in our interests and listening to us? We still don't understand why the council was so intransigent and ignored peaceful protest and reasoned argument. Was it a power thing, or was it you know, stupidity and people didn't understand the contract, or was it corruption? We need to learn from this so that something similar doesn't happen on another topic. And we need to restore trust in a vital public body. Millions of pounds of public money were wasted, or resources wasted. But as far as I know, no council staff or members were disciplined for their actions. A forced apology isn't enough, and that's not going to get through to mums that are talking about this kind of thing outside the school gates, or people in cafes that are not the people that stand under trees, but are the people that have heard about this topic. So what's your plan? Will people be let go? Will there be an inquiry? Or is there some other way that you're going to restore public trust? Thank you.
Right, thank you, Hannah. First of all, can I say thank you very much for coming to the council chamber. I don't think I've seen you before to come to the chamber. And I do recognise that, you know, we do get regular representatives of the members of the public coming to the chamber, as we'll see today, who are always welcome and appreciated. And I do mean that genuinely. But it's always interesting and helpful when we see new members of the public the first time to come to the chamber to raise issues, and I do genuinely mean that. However, what I would always say to anyone that comes into the chamber and uses that word corruption, I do personally think that when anyone comes to the chamber and makes any sort of suggestion, let's say, that there is some corruption involved, then I would always ask you to rethink when you ask that question and provide some evidence of that nature, because it's a very, very serious suggestion. So I'm going to brush over that on this point, but I'm just saying what I always say to anyone. Members, as you've rightly said, members of this council stand in order to improve for election. Every year, in fact, we have local elections each year annually, in order to, and I do genuinely believe this, in order to improve people's lives, every single one of us. We might all have different views about how to do that. We might all identify the problems in different ways that people are facing, and we might all have different solutions. But I do genuinely believe when you stand for election, you're standing for election in order to improve people's lives. Now, I also acknowledge that you can't get everything right. You can't be 100% accurate and 100% perfect. So on this particular matter, and the reason why you've come to the chamber, and I do thank you for that, was about this particular issue regarding the highways contract, the way that it was implemented, and also in particular the way that the street trees were managed. I can't say any more than the council has given a formal apology in response to particularly the most recent report, which is the Ombudsman report. We have accepted all the findings of that report. Both myself and the current and past cabinet member have given a full apology for the findings that the Ombudsman's made in that report. In addition to this, there was also a Forestry Commission report which looked at the management of the highways contract in its entirety, and we've learnt lessons from that also. And because of those things, the council published a document which was entitled Review of Tree Investigations, Lessons Learned and Actions, which sets out how the council has learned those lessons and the extensive work that's been gone on over the past couple of years in particular to develop the new approach that I was talking about, we've been just talking about in response to Mr. Johnson regarding that new street tree strategy that's been developed in partnership with several partners across the city. That particular document that I would refer you to if you wish to go and take a look at it and then come back and raise any further questions from it. It sets out 10 specific lessons learned and 14 actions that have been taken to improve the practice for the future. So if you talk about how can we restore confidence with the people of Sheffield that we are, making the decisions in their best interest, then if you take a look at that document, it clearly states how we are going to improve on practices, and for residents and members of the public in particular, and those with particular interests in certain areas, that you can see that that's the way that we wish to show to the members of the public where we do learn, and then they respond to it, and we improve going forward. There will also, finally, there will also be a detailed response to the recommendations of the Ombudsman report, where you will be able to see, Hannah, where any lessons learned from that report and how we're responding to it and how things need to change in accordance with some of those recommendations. In regards general democracy, as I've said, we stand for election every year. We always put forward to the electorate our manifesto, and in fact, we will be judged on our record. We also have systems within the council where cross-party, right across the council, any member of the council can scrutinise the decisions. There's systems where they can call in decisions made by the leader, individual cabinet members, or the cabinet itself. So as a cabinet, we're always up to scrutiny from both the public and both from all councillors across the council. I'm not sure how much more I can say to you to reassure you that we have learned those lessons. We've made the apology. We accept that particular report in full, and we'll be producing a detailed response in accordance with it. If you wish to go and refer to it, and then if you've got any specific issues where you feel any gaps or that you wish to raise about any particular parts, then I'm sure they will be very much appreciated and welcomed in accordance with taking things forward. So thank you for coming, Hannah, and hopefully we'll see you again at some time in the future. Thank you. I think finally, Mr. Slack.
Go on there, I've arrived.
Hey, there you are. Welcome. Yep.
Thank you very much. And Chair, I appreciate as one of those regulars that you commented on in the previous answer that I am still not persona non gratis yet.
Never.
We'll see. Your successor may have something to say about that. So question one, and with no wish to add to the overwhelm of the Director of Public Health or his team, I see that grey patch is getting a bit bigger, Greg, but reflecting some community concerns. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 crisis continues to be the crisis of how the spread and danger of infection can be mitigated, awaiting a proven vaccine. Recent developments in 10 Downing Street may help, but I doubt it. Their record so far has been literally deadly. Yorkshire and Humber deaths are currently 27% above the 5-year average. Beyond this ongoing tragedy, there is the worry that not enough is being done. For myself, a number of people, friends, neighbours and health professionals I know, have commented to me on a phenomenon in schools that they struggle to understand. It would appear that when a case is identified in a classroom, the protocol being implemented is that the students adjacent to the affected pupil, to their left and right, are expected to isolate. Students in other parts of the classroom, in front of the pupil and behind, are not, nor are students who mingle with the pupil in or out of the classroom apparently affected. Is this the correct interpretation of the rules? Who decided those rules? And is there medical evidence that this is a sufficient response for A, the school body, but also the wider population? Is the head teacher of a school allowed any leeway on the rules? And with Ofsted not willing to enter schools during lockdown, how are the rules being monitored? And finally on this, what is the proportion of pupils currently infected or self-isolating due to potential exposure? And then question 2, is it normal practice for letters suspending housing and council tax benefits to be sent out on the same day as the letter asking for information about changed circumstances? Do Cabinet realise how distressing this might be to residents already struggling to cope with poverty, pandemic fears and the lockdown, especially if the suspension letter arrives 3 days before the request for information? And are Cabinet aware that the phone advisors have little or no suitable information on which to base their advice? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slack. Jackie, would you like to answer the first series of questions, please?
Yes, will do. Thank you, Julie. And thank you very much for coming, and thank you for sending me the questions in advance, Mr. Slack. That was very useful. I will reply to them verbally, but because some of the answers are quite long and I don't want to go through every single one of them, I'll send them in written form as well, if that's okay.
That's fine, thank you.
I'm going to take each question in separate. So, is this the correct interpretation of the rules? That was one of your first questions, and I think I just wanted to say that all schools follow a National Public Health England standard operating procedure for managing positive cases of COVID-19, and this framework provides guidance to schools on how to undertake contact tracing. And as I'm just going to tell you, I won't go, there's a link in the stuff I send you back, there's a link, and there's also lots of detail underneath, but I'll just say some of the information. This standard operating procedure outlines that a contact is a person who has been close to somebody who has tested positive for COVID-19 anytime from 2 days before the person was symptomatic up to 10 days from the onset of the symptoms. This is when they are infectious to others. For example, a contact can be a person who has had face-to-face contact within 1 metre with someone who has tested positive for COVID-19, including being coughed on, having a face-to-face conversation within 1 metre, having skin-to-skin physical contact, or contact within 1 metre for 1 minute or longer without face-to-face contact. Also, a person who has been within 2 metres of someone who has tested positive for COVID for more than 15 minutes. So, and then there's a full guidance, and we know a lot about what's important and all the different stages of the key stages and everything. And so I will send you that. The issue for me, in answer to your question, it might seem different in different schools. I think each school are often looking at their own situation. So primary schools, their bubbles are sometimes different to secondary schools. So I know in some primary schools, for instance, that they've got the same teacher and the same support worker with a group of children, and those group of children they have their teaching together, they have their lunch together, they have their playtime together, and they have their teaching, and they go home. So their bubble is just together, and they don't mix in any other times. Others do it differently. So who decides the rules? As I said, the standard operating procedure is developed by the Public Health England, and the guidelines are peer reviewed. They're written by public health consultants in communicable diseases and are based on scientific evidence practice models to ensure reduced virus transmission and robust risk assessment. And the methodology used for contact tracing is scientifically renowned and recognised model across a range of communicable diseases. And this contact tracing model is adapted to ensure it fits the epidemiology of the virus and to reduce the risk and transmission. Is there medical evidence that this is a sufficient response for the school body and for the wider population? That was your question 3. Across schools, across the city schools, have been implementing effective contact tracing since the start of the new academic year. And to date, Sheffield schools have remained open and senior leadership teams are effectively implementing robust contact tracing in settings. This is evident in that where positive COVID-19 cases have occurred, that the key contacts have been identified, and these key contacts have then self-isolated, and this has resulted in the transmission of the virus slowing. The next question you asked is the head teacher allowed any leeway on the rules? Well, as always, when considering what direct action to take as a result of positive cases, head teachers and their senior management do the following things. They will contact the National Department of Health helpline. They will speak with our local authority public health team, who work jointly with the school to undertake a thorough risk assessment. This risk assessment is bespoke to the setting and takes into account a range of issues, including the number of cases, the potential impact and further transmission of the virus. Head teachers tend to follow advice and guidance provided both the public health, local authority public health team and also Public Health England in general. And also head teachers will also follow a very precautionary approach depending on the circumstances within their setting. And then your question 5 was, with Ofsted not willing to enter schools during lockdown, how are the rules being monitored? Very good question. The local authority public health team and Public Health England are working directly with schools to review the cases and monitor the support for contact tracing. Where a concern is flagged about a school's approach, this is followed up wherever possible. And this is important to note that decisions are taken based on a risk assessment basis and may also take into account issues that are internal to the school setting and specific to individual case circumstances. What is the proportion of pupils currently infected or self-isolating due to potential exposure? We do not routinely collect this information on self-isolation as it changes on a daily basis. We have got some information which I'll send you, which relates to the number during a period of time and the total number of confirmed cases across school settings. School closures, we've had none at the moment. So I think that answers all your questions. If I may, Chair, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank our local public health team officers in the council. Especially, I'd like to thank Bethan Plant, who has been working with both schools and early years providers and universities and colleges to do the very best that we can. And I want to thank the Interim Director of Education, Andrew Jones. Our officers have been doing the same sort of work. Learn Sheffield. And I want to thank all the schools and all the school staff that have done such a tremendous job since all this time, since we've been in this pandemic. They have worked hard, firstly to keep the schools running for our for the children of our workers that needed to be in work when other children weren't going, and our most vulnerable children. And since they've been open in September, to keep the schools going. No school has closed since September, despite them having to juggle and I know the teachers must be the same as a lot of our officers are across the city, overwhelmed by the amount of work this has engendered. But I do think that it's all credit as well to the parents and the carers and the children and young people out there who have thought about everybody's safety and tried to be responsible. And we all know it's very difficult, because when you're little and you're 3 or 4, it's very difficult to understand why you can't hug your friend at school, and it's very difficult, or at nursery. So I do really think, Mr. Slack, that, and I hope you do too, our schools have been tremendous during this time, and so has everybody else, and it's been very difficult for everybody. And I really truly believe that with support from our public health team and all the rest of support nationally and locally, that they've worked as hard as they can to keep their schools safe, and the most important thing, to keep them open for our most vulnerable and our children who need that education. Because we know, don't we, as research has shown, the children that are losing out on education are those children that would not succeed as well as we want them. So we need them to be at school. So I know we don't agree on whether schools should close or not, but I hope you feel a bit more confident that what we're trying to do and how we're trying to support them. And thank you very much for keeping coming. I would echo everything the leader said. I think, we're here to be called to account. I feel as in my role, I'm a champion, and I should be a champion and advocate for people in Sheffield, not just in my ward, but in the city. And I know that a lot of the people who come here to ask questions, and I'm sure you do too, you're being that as well and challenging us, and that's always welcome. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Drayton.
Right, thank you. And finally, Paul Wood, for the final question. Have we lost him?
He's on mute. Paul, you're muted.
Mute, Paul. That's going to be the most sort of well-known word of 2020, isn't it? You're on mute.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
It hadn't got a little red thing on my screen. Anyway, I'll start again. Anyway, nice to see you, Nigel, and to see that you're looking so well and that. Is it normal practice for letters suspending housing and council tax benefits to be sent out on the same day? Yes, this has been done for many years. The reason that it's done is it's very important we know the circumstances if there's been a suspension in council tax support or rent support, that we can get it reassessed and back online as quickly as possible. But it's also important we don't make overpayments, which then we have to go to try and reclaim in the future. I've got a very detailed explanation of it in full, which I'm going to send to you, as against reading it all out today. On question 2, do the Cabinet realise how distressing this might be to residents? I can tell you now, Mr. Slack, that from day one of this pandemic, I've had a weekly meeting with various officers in various departments looking at how we mitigate the effect of this on our residents. What we've done over that period, we've put information out through the LCRT teams. We do a 20,000 email drop every month to our tenants where we've got email addresses. We get information distributed through the TARAs. We put the press releases out to all of the media channels. We use Facebook, we use Twitter, and all the information is linked to them contacting us if they've got any hardship problems at all. Our policy is very, very simple. If you have not had any reduction in your income through COVID, we expect you to pay your rent and your council tax. If your family has been affected by furlough, loss of job, or any of the other, or reduction in hours or anything at all that has affected your family income, we will talk to you and make an arrangement with your rent and your council tax to stop you getting into a mess with us. But where your circumstances haven't altered, we expect you to pay your rent and we expect you to pay your council tax. We think that is only fair, and that is the policy of the council. So anyone who's suffering any hardship whatsoever, they can come to us and we will have a very sympathetic ear and come to an arrangement that they can afford. What we've also done, we've increased the local assistance grant by a further £760,000. We've put extra money into the hardship fund of the housing revenue account to help people with the rent. We've got other schemes available through various things available through the CAB, and we've increased the funding to the CAB to put additional advisors into there to cope with what we have seen as a great increase in the number of people requiring advice who go to them as against coming direct through the housing services. On the third question, regarding our staff, I don't recognise this at all. Our staff are very well informed. They might not be able to answer every question and they might have to pass people forward onto somebody else. But the Council's Revenue and Benefits Contact Centre have a full briefing on every change that we get, and sometimes these changes are happening on a weekly basis from central government. Out of the number of cases we've dealt with, and I don't have the exact figure, but it's well over 100 a day. It is, so that's 500 a week. We've dealt with thousands and thousands of inquiries through the various channels since the start of the pandemic. And this is the first time anyone's come to me and said they haven't been able to get advice. So if you have specifics regarding this, I would like you to let me know, because out of the thousands and thousands of people we have given advice to, I have not had a single complaint as a cabinet member that people have not been able to either get advice or the support that they need. So if you have specifics, please let me know. Let me know the people's details. I will follow it up straight away, because that's not a situation that I recognise at all. But thank you for the questions, and it's good that I've been able to again reiterate the massive support that this council's been able to provide to its residents from March onwards, and will continue to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Right, thank you for that. I think that concludes public questions and petitions. So the next item is items called in for scrutiny. I don't believe. No.
If I may, Chair, yeah, we do have one item that has been called in since the last meeting of Cabinet. That was a decision that was taken at the last meeting of Cabinet on 21st October relating to the Sheffield COVID Business Recovery Plan. And that decision is to be considered at the meeting of Economic and Environmental Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee, which is meeting next Tuesday, the outcome of which will be reported back to the next meeting of Cabinet.
Great. Thanks for that, Paul. Right, the next item is COVID-19 update. So, Greg, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. So I shall keep this relatively short. There are some slides which Paul has up. I guess Paul will put them on the website in the fullness of time. So I'll keep it fairly short. I'll do screen share. Okay, so can you see my slides? Someone just nod to tell me you can see the slides. Thank you. So firstly, epidemiology. Secondly, the lockdown we are two weeks into the lockdown. Thirdly, some where next. A lot of people are asking what the next few months will look like. And fourthly, the response. And the response, to cut to the chase, remains largely intact. So epidemiology. You've seen iterations of this slide before. In a single slide, high rate, fluctuating and now beginning to fall. But we've got 300 cases per 100,000 residents over a 7-day period. So the 7-day incidence is in the order of 300 per 100,000. Nearly 600,000 people live in Sheffield. So you can quite quickly see that the volume of people being diagnosed is really quite high. I've said this before, but I'll say this again. I was twitched in summer when rates started to peak above 20 per 100,000. Now they're significantly higher than that. That's not a Sheffield specific problem, that's a national issue. They are coming down now. And in Sheffield has the second lowest 7-day rate in Yorkshire. I'd like to take sole credit, but that would be unfair and untrue. It is partly, not wholly, but it's partly down to the work of many thousands, possibly tens of thousands of people who have put in a lot of effort to do the right thing and to implement the strategy that we've adopted. So coming in the right way, 15% of people test positive. So of 100 people with symptoms who get a test, 15 of them test positive. Again, to compare to summer, it was about 1.5% in summer. So a huge increase in the positivity. And that's quite stable. That's not started to come down yet, but it possibly will. You can see that the more recent trend for yourself. These are data for South Yorkshire. The bottom right hand is Sheffield. The Sheffield peak, and we are over the peak in cases. Was earlier than for the other 3 places in South Yorkshire, and is coming down steadily. It went up quite quickly, and it will come down quite steadily. That's just the nature of the way that the epidemic curve works. But I think it will come down, but probably fluctuate with some ups and some downs for the next few months at least. And I'd be loath to predict beyond the next few months. Geography-wise, this is still and has been almost throughout principally an issue of household transmission. So the initial infection is acquired somewhere clearly, but the secondary infections are principally household-based for 3 reasons really. One, we feel safe in our households. We let our guard down and our kind of standard infection control behaviours, washing our hands, for instance. 2, they are not COVID secure. They're the least COVID secure venues in the city, in any city. We don't wash down the touch points regularly, as many other places did when they were open, but many of them aren't open at the moment. And thirdly, we spend most time there. So most of the transmission events that we see are household, and that's the same across the city. The east of Sheffield is becoming more of a concern. We've seen this pattern in the first wave. We've seen this pattern again in the second wave. Three things driving that. 1, lower car ownership, therefore people are using public transport more. Secondly, people are more likely to be in occupations where there are kind of face-to-face interaction with other humans is necessary, be that in retail or be that in the care sector or be in other sectors of the economy. And thirdly, denser, more crowded communities, more homes, multiple occupation, and that again leads to more transmission events. So we're seeing that pattern, and the pattern of illness that follows will be the same. Sadly, I wish that weren't the case, but it is. Age-specific rates are decreasing across the board now. I've commented on this spike before, and full council last month heard the two vice chancellors talk on the impact of university opening. This big spike was the impact of universities. Even if you take the 18 to 24-year-old population out of the mix, which we have done, the graph doesn't show it, Sheffield is like everywhere else in South Yorkshire. Up until a week and a half ago, I would have said the age-specific rates are increasing in all age bands, but the rate of increase is slowing down significantly. Roll forward a week, and the rate of increase, the rate of 7-day infection rate is decreasing in all age bands. I'm due an update of this picture sometime later this afternoon, actually, and I'm expecting that that trend will continue. One thing to note, the 85 plus and elderly, you'll notice there's a significant fall off there. I think that's an artifact of data and there's something funny going on with the data. I don't believe it's fallen that quickly in the space of a week. So as I say, I'm expecting an update on this slide this afternoon, but I expect the trends will continue in that general pattern. Hospitals are quite busy, and that's an understatement, significant understatement. Sheffield Hospital is coping. Hospital activity is flattening, and you can see that the trend for yourself. So blue is COVID-19 patients receiving oxygen, red is patients on non-invasive ventilation, and orange, you can see at the very top, is patients on mechanical ventilation. There is a lag. So it takes a while for a case to become poorly enough to end up in hospital, and for someone that ends up in hospital to be lucky enough to end up on ventilation. So the orange may grow over time, but overall hospital activity is flattening. As I say, the interpretation is nuanced, and whilst it's flattening, and whilst that's clearly good news, it's flattening at a very high rate. At a busy time for the NHS. We're starting to approach winter. It's becoming a very, very busy time for the NHS. So the room for manoeuvre is pretty small, actually, almost non-existent. So we do need to take care about our behaviour as a population. In epidemiology, rates 300 per 100,000 population, in the order of 2,000 cases a week. The number being tested is coming down, and that's a bit of a concern, and I'll come back onto that at the end. It is possible we'll get to 200 cases per 100,000 in 7 days by the 2nd of December. Positivity 14-15%. I wouldn't want to call what that will look like by the 2nd of December. A significant proportion of Sheffield Teaching Hospital's beds have a patient with COVID in them. That is flat, the trend is flat, but it's a high level, it's still very difficult to manage. Thus my messaging is that we mustn't do anything that will make it worse. The numbers are very, very high and far too high for comfort and remain so. So second point, 2 weeks into lockdown, prior to that we were in a tiered system of restrictions. There's no doubt that the tiered system has helped, and has helped significantly to flatten off the rate of growth. Evidence of that in the northeast, some evidence of that in northwest, particularly Greater Manchester, and some evidence of that in South Yorkshire as well. So, but now we're 2 weeks into a national lockdown, and it will probably achieve its job. Mobility is falling. Those of you who've got Google on your mobile phone, Google takes track of where you are. I don't know how it does this, I must admit, but this is the Google mobility data. Right at the very end of lockdown, mobility was 50, 60, nearly 70% for public transport, down on normal patterns of activity, which is the line in the middle. Lockdown ended, mobility went up. Since we've been in the space of being rather more restrictive on individuals' behaviour, mobility has started to go down. Currently, mobility looks a bit like June. The expectation is that we'll get to a bit like May in terms of our mobility, so we'll get mobility down here by the 2nd of December. Mobility is an indicator of social mixing. Social mixing is an indicator of cases, and cases is an indicator of people becoming poorly further down the line. The purpose of the lockdown, to get R naught to below 1, which it probably will, to get the level of infection back to mid-May levels, which is ambitious, given where we are now, very ambitious. R naught is driven by out of household contacts, and no doubt the lockdown will make a difference to that, at some cost, social and economic cost, to reduce the mean number of contacts per case. It may, and I think it will, reset expectations and behaviour. We are and remain in this for the long haul. Anyone who thinks this will be over by the 2nd of December is mistaken. It may be over by spring and early summer, but with the best will in the world and all my efforts, I don't think it will be over before then. There are some caveats. people will get fed up. I'm fed up. Everyone I know is fed up. We will get fed up, and if we get fed up and then behave in a way thinking it's all gone away, then rates will continue to go back up again, which is certainly not what we don't want to do. None of the lockdown changes the fundamentals. It buys time, but it doesn't change the fundamentals. I don't know what happens after 4 weeks. The measures in place have definitely slowed the spread. So doubling time of the illness was 4 days in March, and it's about 17 days now. And that's testament to the wide range of measures that are in place. But 4 weeks in itself won't get us back to normal. It won't get us to the end. I don't know how long the lockdown will last. The Prime Minister's very clearly said it will last up until the 2nd of December. And I think it will, but I think we'll be back in some form of tiered restriction from the 2nd of December, and it's impossible to call, and I'm not cited on that. And the last thing I'll say is the lockdown is less restrictive. So education and many forms of employment are still open. So that will have an impact on the potency of the impact of the lockdown going forward. But the aim remains to get R0 to below 1. As restrictions are taken off on the 2nd of December, positive changes that we've seen may get lost. I think we will get R0 to below 1, probably to 0.9. That will need some luck. Remember, the March lockdown got R0 to 0.6, but we'll be in a place where R0 is 0.9 to 1, and case numbers are very high versus where we were in summer. Case numbers were really quite low. The room for manoeuvre is very, 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 very limited. Hence, I think we will be in some form of restriction for some time after the 2nd of December. And there's some crystal ball gazing that may be needed on that one. It's worth reading these, and I'll just draw attention to them briefly. Sage published some scenarios for the next 6 months over the weekend, and they were very helpful, very clear, and very incisive. A bit of crystal ball gazing still, but certainly worth the read. There are 4 broad scenarios: high and uncontrolled, low and controlled. Clearly, low and controlled is the scenario we all want. What I think we'll get is high and controlled, and then there's the alternating scenario in between. To get low and controlled, and I won't read them all, you can read them for yourself, but we need to significant decisive action to push R0 well below 1. I don't think we'll get much below 1, to be honest. We may need longer action to hold R well below 1 in areas that currently have higher prevalence, and that does include most of Northern England. In fact, it will soon include most of England. Once prevalence is low, prevalence is not low, but once prevalence is low, measures could be eased somewhat. But measures will be needed over winter to keep R0 below 1. Tier 1 as was, probably not enough to do so. Tier 3 as was, is enough to do so. Tier 2, with all of the basic universal interventions in place, might be enough to do so. But as I say, the Chief Medical Officer is very clear, and I'm in the same space. Our room for manoeuvre is very, very limited. Last point, the strategy, a very complex picture, but it aims to give some insight into the totality of the strategy. Strategy and plan remains in place. So the strategy is threefold: keep people safe, protect the vulnerable, reopen Sheffield. The Cabinet said that strategy in February, I think, and has remained in place and stood the test of time throughout. And I'd recommend it doesn't change, actually. It still works. The plan, the operational plan, is known as the Outbreak Control Plan. Ultimately, it's owned by the Coronavirus Prevention and Management Board, and it's operationalised by the Outbreak Control Strategy Board, which Eugene Walker chairs on Thursdays. And the boxes in the diagram give some insight into the component parts. But the plan is based on the things that make difference. There's no single thing that makes difference. Sadly, there are no silver bullets. But the plan is made up of those components: prevention, managing individual incidents in schools or care homes or workplaces or any other setting you care to mention, the basic public health stuff, minimising testing delay. The biggest thing we can do is minimising the time from the point at which someone develops symptoms to the point at which they get a test, and actually then they get a result of that test. So we've pushed really hard getting tested, even if mild symptoms. Optimizing contact tracing speed and coverage, and now we've stood up a local contact tracing service to work with NHS to test and trace. Optimizing isolation. We know that the majority of people who are recommended to don't or can't, so we're supporting people as best we can, and we're focusing consistently on simplifying the messaging and focused on consent and consensus rather than harder-edged enforcement. Some talking points, then I shall finish. There's a lot of discussion, I see it a lot, about the compliance and lockdown and the rules versus the nature of the illness. It remains a really rather dangerous respiratory virus that's very easy to spread. I hear a myth a lot that if you go into hospital, you'll never come out. Untrue. Treatments have improved massively. Outcomes amongst those who are lucky enough to be hospitalised are hugely better than they were in March, April, May. It's not so bad. It can be quite bad. It's not so bad for many, but it can be still a very, very serious illness for a great number of people and very infectious. And then the herd immunity the notion is difficult to kill. The best way to manage this is to protect vulnerable individuals, but will allow a level of herd immunity to build up. It's wrong. The best way to protect health service capacity, to protect our vulnerable loved ones, and to protect our economy is to keep community transmission low. Next week or two, last slide, post 2nd of December, I don't know what happens. None of us will know what happens. We aren't anywhere near what might have been considered exit criteria from tier 3 to tier 2. I think our note will be just below 1, but with a high rate of infection, I do think people will be fed up. I will certainly be fed up. Testing is proving testing. The most important thing in this space is getting a test for those people with symptoms. And we know that most people with symptoms don't get tested. So that's certainly the most important thing we can do. All of the things are entirely secondary to that. So accordingly, we put a lot of energy and effort into keeping the range of sites where people can go and get tested, walk in and get a test. If you've got symptoms, there's a range of sites available in Sheffield. That will long be the case. So putting testing into the context of all of the things that needs to follow, contact tracing, isolation, support for that matters. Asymptomatic testing is moving quite quickly. There's the Liverpool pilot many people will have read about. That is a pilot. The purpose of pilots is to learn from the pilot. There's some interesting work going on. It's definitely proven to be operationally possible. We don't yet know whether it's valuable, so we should learn from the pilot. And we're rapidly developing the pathways and protocols to use new tests in asymptomatic people within a certain number of defined cohorts. We're doing significant work to prepare for the vaccine. So we anticipate some doses of the vaccine will be available this calendar year. I don't think there will be many doses available this calendar year, but some very serious effort is being put into preparing our systems and processes so that when we do have significant volume of doses, there will be an all-out effort to vaccinate as many people as quickly as possible. I've said we have localized contact tracing in place. That is doing exactly what we want to do. And lastly, that, as I said, the fundamentals will remain the fundamentals: washing your hands, keeping your distance, wearing a face covering, limiting the number of people you have contact with. They have been the fundamentals from the start. They'll remain the fundamentals till the end, and the basics of the strategy remain intact. So I shall stop there, Chair, and see whether there are any questions.
Thank you, Greg. Have we got any questions from members? No comments? No. I've just got a couple of comments to make. One is, it's just reminded me of the question Mr. Johnson asked earlier around skills and knowledge of other people within Sheffield and other elected members. I forgot to mention the Prevention and Management Board. So you've reminded me of that, Greg. Yeah. Thank you. That, you know, the Sheffield COVID-19 Prevention and Management Board actually own, in a sense, the strategy and take responsibility for ensuring that we follow the strategy. We're constantly reviewing it, but also, more importantly, that we're using that board to get out the communications and the right messaging, and identifying where there may be any outbreaks and any other causes of transmission in certain parts or certain groups, particularly within the city, how then therefore we respond to that. And just to say, if I was responding to Mr. Johnson's question, if he's still listening, that on that board, all parties representative on that board, as well as the voluntary community faith sector, the police, students, universities, representatives from BAME communities, disability, age, etc. So it is quite a cross section of our communities, including political. And then the other thing I did also want to mention was around the vaccine, because it's this may be a question, but even I think a lot of people are thinking this is the silver bullet. We get the vaccine, we all get vaccinated, and it might be over. So there's that, which is, you know, we do need to give people some hope, and it is very good news. But I was also reading that the vaccine actually takes 28 days to become effective. So even when we roll out the vaccine, it's 28 days after each. So we're still, you know, if even the people that get it in December, it don't mean that they can go out over Christmas. It can go out over Christmas sort of thing, because it takes 28 days. And whether you're still infectious, even if you've had the vaccine, it makes you less ill. So I think it might be worth saying something what you know about that, Greg.
So thank you, Chair. So on the vaccine, there's a priority ordering that's been set out by the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation. It's on the government website, but basically it's this. First in order of priority are care home residents and care home staff. Staff from the point of view of transmitting it to residents, residents from the point of view of arguably they are the most vulnerable group in terms of COVID death. It's quite right, quite appropriate and understandable. Then the very elderly, and I think the age cutoff from memory is 85 plus, and then NHS and social care staff, and that's about keeping the NHS and social care running because it's really quite important to us for all sorts of other reasons, and then working down the age cohorts. I don't know. I mean, it will be an all-out effort to vaccinate as many people as possible. My sense is it will take 3 months minimum, probably longer, to fully vaccinate everybody. If I had to call it, I'd say up to 6 months. And yes, it will be 28 days from point of needle being stuck in arm to point of immunological response. It definitely isn't a silver bullet. I wished it was, but it definitely isn't a silver bullet. And just as a parallel, flu still kills many thousands of people every year. We have a vaccine for flu. We do okay on our flu vaccination, but it doesn't change the need for fundamental infection prevention and control, like washing your hands and wearing face covering. So I don't know whether or not this will be a one-shot lifelong immunity vaccine, but from what I'm reading, I don't think it will be. I think there will be a booster and or a catch-up, and I don't know that. That's just a guess from what I'm reading. So sadly, it won't be the magic bullet that we all want it to be, but it will help massively. It's when people talk about game changers, vaccine will be a game changer, but it won't solve all of our problems, sadly.
Right, thank you. Jack, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Julie. Yeah, Greg, just about hospitals, and you just touched on the flu, and you mentioned about how, yes, we're doing okay at the moment, but we've still got the winter to come. And I just wondered if I don't suppose you've got the answer now, but how many cases, flu cases in a normal year would we have going through the hospital, if you see what I mean? So what with this will be presumably on top, if we're thinking about people will still get flu, won't they? And whether and it's trying to understand have we got to add on COVID on top of the flu, and if we did, and if all of a sudden we saw a sort of a raising of the flu, people with flu, what impact that would have after, when does that start in past years? Is it in December, January, February? I'm just understanding, I wasn't quite sure when that bulge would be and when the hospitals would be like near to breaking point generally. This is pre-COVID.
Normal years from about December till February, by far the busiest months. Flu and other seasonal respiratory viruses, there are plenty of others, but flu is the one we worry most about, of course. This year, we've not yet seen a big impact or influx of flu in hospitals. It's probably a bit early for that. That will come in the next few weeks, I suspect. I've not seen the data, but sources are telling me we've had a pretty good response to the flu jab campaign this year. We've got pretty good coverage, certainly more so than most years. This is speculation. I'm loath to speculate in public forums, but it's really interesting to look at the Southern Hemisphere flu hospitalization rates. And it's never a great prediction, but it's a reasonably good prediction. Hospitalizations for flu this year, and I've certainly seen some data from Australia, have fallen off a cliff because everyone's washing their hands a lot, everyone's wearing face coverings, everyone's keeping the distance. So the same things that protect us from COVID also protect us from flu. And then in flu, we've got a vaccine that we use as well. So now I don't know whether or not that will happen in this country. Too soon to tell. Probably not is my sense, but I think we will have an impact from us all taking care, and particularly those who are most susceptible to flu, or particularly hospitalization from flu, are the elderly, who we know, all of our insight tells us, we know are taking extra care with regard to COVID and limiting the number of people they're in contact with, etc. So I think it won't be a difficult flu year, but you may shoot me when I prove to be wrong in a few months' time, maybe.
No, thank you for that. I think one of the other things that we raised at the prevention board was gastroenteritis as well. That the fact that we're all washing our hands and keeping our distance, them sort of contact sort of diseases, etc. There's less of, so that's a good thing. I suppose the one looming issue will be alcohol related conditions, because we all know that everyone's turning to other things, aren't they? When you say get fed up, I think it's a genuine, it's not just I'm fed up. For a lot of people, it is a genuine I'm just exhausted by it all, and then they turn to things that could harm them in other ways. So I suppose that's something we'll need to watch out post-COVID. I'm finally just going to take this opportunity to say that the Sheffield COVID-19 Prevention and Management Board hold a monthly public question session, and the next one is Friday, the 27th of November. So a week on Friday, there is a session for members of the public to come and ask, particularly Greg, myself and other members are there, on any COVID-19 related questions. So if anyone out there is listening, please do come along and raise any concerns or questions that you have. That's another opportunity to do that. Thank you very much, Greg. Yet again, a very comprehensive report to us on the circumstances in Sheffield. Right, the next item 9, is staff retirements. And we can see that we have, let me see, can I find the page? I'm finding the list. Oh, one person. Robert, Principal Planning Officer, has been with us 41 years, so we certainly do wish to place on record our appreciation, extend our best and warmest wishes to Robert for his long and happy retirement, and direct that an appropriate extract of the resolution is forwarded to Robert. So can we all agree that, Chair?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. Right, item 10, capital approvals.
Very much. I'm Damien Watkinson. Finance manager for the capital team. Just to take you through very quickly the changes to the capital programme that are coming forward this month. Under transport, we've got 60k being spent on a crossing to support the Little Don Link, which is a cycle route in the north of Sheffield. So this will, it's something that was intended to be done earlier, but the funding is now being found for that. Under our green and open spaces, we've got a development from funding from the advanced funding from the Towns deal for Stocksbridge at Oxley Park, which is going to develop play facilities, access, and some work at the leisure centre to create a cafe area. Under our housing growth, we're spending some money to demolish a building at Sydney Street to make that available for housing redevelopment. So the money we spend rectifying this site will make it more saleable and improve the capital receipt we can gain from that, and also aid the quicker development of the site. The large money is being spent in housing investment, where we are moving into phase 2 of an electrical strategy about rewiring, etc., all council houses. So phase 2 of this is estimated to cost 28.9 million across the coming 3-4 years. We also have work being done on single staircase tower blocks at Hanover and Stannington, so where we're spending 10 million there, working on the post-Grenfell recommendations. The buildings are compliant as they stand, but we're taking this opportunity to improve not only the access and egress from the building, but also the general condition of those buildings, and that's around £10 million. We're spending money under the people portfolio at schools. Halfway Infant at school needs a new office block, so there's 300k there. And we're also spending money now on refurbing a property at Carfield to provide trainer flats for young people leaving care. So there'll be 7 flats, I believe, created there. Our disabled facilities grant spend has changed its profile slightly, so those items are on there, which is adaptations to people's houses that we get for a grant from government for. That's going to fall, it's fallen generally overall by about 0.8 million, but that is the impact of COVID in that it required access to people's houses. So unfortunately, it's not been able to deliver as many adaptations as it would have done, like many facilities that we deliver across the city. And then finally, under essential compliance and maintenance, we've got some fire risk assessment works to be undertaken, and the feasibility for those at a couple of sites across the city, and also work to the town hall atrium. Some feasibility work being done on that, where we have got timbers that are decaying and rainwater goods that need replacing. So sorry, that's a quick whistle-stop tour of everything. If there are any questions on anything particular.
Right, okay. Let me get everyone up here. Any questions or comments? Mary.
Just a comment, Chair. It's about Oxley Park development, and £500,000 is a significant amount of money. So, you know, it's nice to have a bit of good news to talk about. And it does go on lots of playgrounds, play trails, and paths, car parking and other things. But that money would not have been available if it wasn't, they didn't have plans ready to go. And those plans take a number of years sometimes in the making. And so I just want to thank the Friends of Oxley Park, because they've been involved, also the leisure centre up there, and Julie Grocott, Councillor Julie Grocott, who's also been involved in this. So a lot of people to thank, because without those people, this wouldn't have been a project that would have been ready to get that money. So it's really pleasing that that they've been there working really hard and have got this £500,000, which is really well deserved. And the plans don't stop there, there'll be more to come.
Right, thank you. Any others? Terry.
Thanks, Chair. It basically just to follow on from Mary, but just saying that why we have COVID and we're having to deal with this horrific pandemic, but the council's still functioning and still working, you know, all across this city, from the north of the city with the crossings to across with Hanover, Stannington, Callow, with the tower blocks, with a massive investment from the HRA, to the halfway infant school of 310k. It's just showing that we are trying to continue to work and to progress for all citizens across the city, and still trying to get that spend out there to increase for the betterment of our citizens, Chair. Thank you.
Right, great, thanks. I've only just got one comment, echo particularly what Terry said, that when you look at the list, it's a wide section of covers virtually every area in Sheffield. But it's the one where we, COVID related delays to expenditure where it's been a government grant, and whether there's any restrictions on the government clawing it back, i.e. we can't carry it forward because we've not spent it. So it would just be a general question around bringing it to Cabinet's attention, where we've had a government grant for something, and because of COVID, there's been a delay in producing consultation, for example, producing plans, because as Mary said, to get to a point where you actually get shovels in the ground, a lot of work's gone on before that. And that type of work's being done right now for plans that we expect to be realised next year and year after and year after. And some of that preparation work will be delayed as well. So where we think that there's any work where is related to a government grant, that there's no chance of, if we don't spend it within a certain period, that we lose it. And I think not for now, but as long as we can see where, and then we can lobby government, of course, on our behalf. Like they did with the business grant funding, they give it you one day, you've got to spend it next day, and the criteria is so restrictive that it's virtually impossible to get that money spent in such a short period of time, and then they claw it back, which is ridiculous. So if Damien, if you can think, not now, but if there's any areas where we're concerned that we can't carry it over, or government, we may not get it, or government might claw it back, then if it's brought to our attention, then we can follow it up.
Yeah, we keep an eye out on those, particularly, you know, in this current climate. So yeah, people are bringing those to our attention. So yeah, we will bring those forward. I mean, it's something that's already happening. For instance, on the 1-for-1 receipts for council housing, that those discussions are already happening. So
yeah, and it's just the political lobbying, I think, that we need to be aware of as well. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Damien, thank you for the presentation. I'm really pleased to see the investment going in on the Sidley Street site and the improvements that will bring to that locality. The one thing I'd flag up is that it feels inconsistent that we as a council are looking to enhance our city centre and do development to deliver housing along this corridor, yet government has recently turned down application and bids from us to bring in resources to develop the flood resilience and flood protection for those areas. So it's noting the fact that yet again government is somewhat out of step with where the councils are, and I'm hoping that we can make sure that any economic gains that we would be delivering to our city down in that corridor are reflected by government investing in the city and helping us to protect our citizens as we move forward, because that site development is critical for our infrastructure, and we need to make sure that that comes forward. So any enhancement we can do there, and that will actually change maybe the business case that government will see, because they see the cash benefits only, not the actual benefit to citizens. So thank you for that, and I'll keep an eye on how that develops and how that affects our systems. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you. Can we agree the recommendations in the report, which is additions and variations?
Agreed.
Agreed. Great, thank you, and thank you, Damien, and I extend that to all the team, obviously. Okay.
Thank you.
Right, item 11, when I'm going to get to it, is revenue and capital. Is that you, Damien, as well, or is it Ryan?
Chair, it's me. Thanks, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ryan Keyworth. I'm the Council's Director of Finance and Commercial Services. The report in front of us is the month 6 budget monitoring report covering the period to the 30th of September 2020. So just to pull out a few highlights. We're now forecasting an overspend at that point in time of £16.2 million for the council, which is actually an improvement of £7.2 million over the position last reported to Cabinet in April, the last formal report. The cost of the COVID pandemic included in this report is £81 million. About £22.7 million of that relates to council tax and business rates, and that will impact the council over the next few years through something called a collection fund. That leaves £58.5 million, which are going to impact the council this year. At the point that this report was written, we'd received £43.6 million of government funding. So that gave us a gap of 16.2, which was 14.9 million relating to COVID. So the overspend, the extra expenditure on COVID, less the government grant received, and a small amount of business business as usual overspend at that point in time. I think it's worth bringing the Cabinet up to speed, a little bit more up to date on the numbers, because things have changed materially recently. An announcement on the 12th of October, which was detailed about 10 days later than that, gives this council an extra £11.8 million of government funding. And we're now also expecting Sheffield City Trust to receive some funding from Department for Media, Culture and Sport for their arts and cultural facilities, particularly the arena and City Hall. And we've also received news that we're going to get some funding from Sheffield City Region, again, to help us with some of our recovery and regeneration activities in the city. That will significantly improve the council's position, and I'm expecting the month 7 report, which won't be a formal Cabinet report, but which will come to members very soon, to show a significant improvement. That said, we are in the middle of the second significant volume of COVID cases, and we are monitoring the council's finances very closely. So we go into that second wave in a relatively good position. We would still show an overspend, but a relatively good position. And now we have to monitor the council's finances through the second wave. There are 3 appendices to the report. There's a more detailed report on the collection fund, which sets out the 22.7 million deficit that will hit us over the next few years. Appendix 2 summarises the capital programme Damien just talked about. And Appendix 3 is the detailed Treasury Management report that we bring before members twice each year, once alongside the budget and once alongside this report. And there's nothing material that I want to report to you from any of those reports.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Any questions or comments? I think we've all rehearsed our response to this situation. We sort of, I've said this over the last 10 years, that we sort of feel like we live, breathe and beat this information on a daily basis, because it's constant pressure, isn't it, trying to deliver, rightly so, the essential and critical services to our citizens, whilst at the same time recognising that the money is not always forthcoming from government. I will just take this opportunity to point out that I believe that today we've just launched the sort of business grant applications for the, it will be launched in different phases, where, if you remember, we were in tier 2 for 10 days, we were in tier 3 for, 13 days, and now we're in a lockdown. The different sort of schemes available to businesses, and I mean that in the wider sense, because one of the problems was where some people fell through the cracks, basically, of the government national scheme. So if you were like sole traders, self-employed, freelancers, and supply chain to some of the businesses that recognised those that had to close, that we've been working on this for the last few weeks, and they will be launched over these particular next couple of days. So hopefully that will be helpful in order for businesses to continue. But thank you to all our staff for making sure that we as a business, a £1.4 billion business, in a sense, the council, delivering the most essential and critical services to our citizens, that we're still in business and we can continue. And we've seen examples of that throughout the last report, and certainly on this one as well. So thank you for the report. I haven't got anyone wishing to raise a question, so can we agree the recommendations of the report? Note the report. Agreed?
Agreed, yeah.
Thank you. Right, I'm now going to try and get back to exit full screen, get back to my agenda, but I am struggling a little bit. Here we go, got there in the end. So it must be item 12. Are we on item 12? Feel me scrolling down.
Item 12.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, I'm scrolling down. I'm trying to find it.
Boundary review at Outerbridge Mill, Chair.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get to the page, because you have to scroll down through when you're going through the reports. This is why I like paperwork in front of me, because I can easily flick several pages at a time, but when I'm scrolling down. So item 12, boundary review at Outerbridge Mill. Okay. Have we got anyone presenting this item?
Julie, yes, I'm presenting on this. Dan Spicer, I'm Strategy and Partnerships.
Sorry, Dan, I couldn't see you there.
Okay. Dan Spicer, Strategy and Partnerships Manager for the Council. So I'll just talk through the context around this paper. It relates to a proposed development between Outerbridge and Warncliffe side and some of the issues that arises from that, and then why we're sort of proposing what we are proposing. I'll just share my screen briefly so I can show it to you. So this is the location of the development in question. As you can see, we've got Outerbridge here and Warncliffe side here. The development site is just off Langsett Road North between the two, marked in red. It crosses the boundary between Sheffield and Barnsley, which is denoted by this green and black line. It also crosses the parish boundary. The green line marks the boundary of Bradfield parish. So the houses are there's going to be about 30% of the houses on the site are planned to be built in this portion here on the Sheffield side, the remaining 70% on this portion here on the Barnsley side. In total, there's permissions for about 284 houses on the site, so it's a reasonably sized development. To zoom out, although most of the land is on the Barnsley side of the boundary, you can see that from the point of view of access to services, the site is a significant distance from any sort of reasonably sized settlement within the Barnsley boundary, and access to the site is primarily through roads that go through Sheffield. So that sort of highlights some fairly obvious issues in relation to delivery of public services and access to public services. Key of that obviously is that we expect that service demand is likely to be in Sheffield, whether that is for schools, for GP surgeries, libraries, etc. And accordingly, services have been drawing up plans to address that. And some of that is fine because the funding for the I'll stop sharing my screen now, actually. So that's fine because the funding for those services follows the user. So for schools, they get pupil funding and it follows people depending on the number is on roll. Some of it, however, is a bit more challenging because eligibility for services is based on residency. And that may cause problems in the future. Also, issues around resources relating to service demand from those properties. So obviously council tax and any new homes bonus that might be applicable to those houses will be divided along the lines of the boundary. There's also some questions about representation. So we can assume that people living in that development once it's built will be accessing council services and indeed Bradfield Parish Council services, but because where the boundary is drawn, they won't have a vote on any of the people being elected to those bodies. There's a question of representation around that. So having identified these issues that's caused by this proposed development, we've done some work with Barnsley to discuss the way forward in relation to this. And long story short, we've sort of agreed that we think the best way forward is to try and request a boundary review for the area to draw that boundary so that it goes around the development in question. That involves both of the authorities making a joint request to the Local Government Boundary Commission for England, and the report asks for authority to officers to make that request. The timescale for that is expected to be somewhere between 12 to 15 months, so it's not necessarily a particularly rapid process, and there is a potential for some of the houses on the development being completed and occupied before that process is fully completed. So we think there is also potentially a need to put in place some interim arrangements around guaranteeing who is providing services and any income related to those properties before that review is completed. So the other recommendation in the report is that all officers be given the authority to work that through with Barnsley, with the outcomes to be presented at a future date. I'll stop there.
All right, thank you, Dan. Any questions, comments? Pretty much straightforward. Terry, you're going to be doing all the work, so negotiating with Barnsley. Good luck with that.
Thanks, Chair, and obviously you know all about that kind of negotiation.
We're getting on really, really well at the minute. Honestly, the way that we're working across South Yorkshire is incredible. So you shouldn't have much trouble. Go on.
As always, obviously everybody facing towards Sheffield the way it should be. I think this is more of a tidying up exercise, a bit of an housekeeping, just so that we can kind of make sure that this development is tidied up and running through as smoothly as we possibly can. Hopefully, working between the authorities and the parish councils, we can get this over the line and give the residents of the new development exactly what they want. Thank you.
Yeah, great, thanks. Mark, did you want a question? And Bob, Mark?
Yes, please. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Chair. So we welcome the development of any new housing. Obviously, we do need more houses within the city, and we've got lots of people to find homes for. Government recently released its white paper and expectations on what housing will look like, installation, renewables, infrastructure deliveries. Also, from the location of it, it is a difficult site with the river running close to it, and it's a site where we're going to need to do, I suspect there'll be lots of remediations required to help defend against climate change issues and flooding issues going forward. And also public transport. We're building houses out that, as you rightly pointed out, in some directions are largely in the middle of nowhere. So how are the people from those localities going to be able to travel around the city and move forward? So though there's a boundary review on this, when will we be able to make sure that the environmental impact of this new development on the locality and wider is taken into account and addressed? When they're looking to, the boundary review will also, I presume, make it easier for us to have impacts on what we'd expect from the developers when they come to hand over the roads that they're given, i.e. the number of trees that they're put in place to mitigate any heat island elements. So will this put us in a better place to expect better environmental rigour on this development and sustainability? And also, how many of these houses will be going forward for social purposes, social housing and social rent? Thanks, Dan.
So it's probably worth saying that the planning process for this development has completed. So I think a lot of those questions have been already addressed through that. I think my understanding is, and I've not been involved in the planning process, that where affordable housing is addressed, a contribution has been made for provision elsewhere in the city. I think the consequence of the boundary review would be to bring the road network for the development inside our boundary as well, and therefore under our purview. So I think that we'd have the sort of same relationship to that as to the road network in the rest of the city.
Yeah, I was about to say that things like that are dealt with through the planning authority. I suppose the question I thought you were going to ask is who is the planning authority, and are they different in Barnsley as to Sheffield? Because sometimes you can find they are, but I would expect that during that process we have to come to a common agreement.
So I can just say the original applications were made jointly to both Barnsley and Sheffield, because of the recognition that the service demand was likely to be in Sheffield. It was handled through Sheffield solely. Yeah,
good. So of course both the planning authorities had an input and agree with whatever's been concluded from that. Okay, great. Right, okay. The recommendations are, as said, for Director of Legal and Governance and Deputy Leader to continue to conduct the negotiations and to request the Boundary Commission to conduct a review. Can we agree those recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed. Right, thank you. Let's scroll down again, scroll. As well as when you're on here, emails are popping up all the time. So item 13, are we on item 13 when I get to the bottom?
Page 105.
105, I'm nearly there. Item 13, statement of licensing policy approval report.
Good afternoon, Chair. So this report this afternoon seeks the approval for the revised statement of licensing policy to be published under the Licensing Act 2003, and the draft policy is attached to the report. Licensing authorities are required to determine and publish a statement at least once every 5 years. During that 5-year period, it's meant to be kept under review. So the legislation has a clear focus on the promotion of 4 licensing objectives, which are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. And our local policy promotes these throughout. It sets out how Sheffield's licensing authority aims to deal with applications for licenses for the sale and supply of alcohol, the provision of regulated entertainment, and the provision of late night refreshment. It's used by lots of different people: applicants, current licence holders, local residents, responsible authorities and officers, as well as members of the licensing committee when considering contested applications. Therefore, an extensive consultation exercise was undertaken early this year. Members of the licensing committee approved the document last month, and if approved today, the policy should be considered by full council in December for publication in 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Any questions or comments? Bob?
I'd just like to thank Claire and officers for getting us to this stage in getting our licensing policy up to date and welcome its content. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, because you know, when you actually look within the statement itself, I was saying earlier, a statement sounds like something quite straightforward. I make statements every day, but this is quite an extremely comprehensive statement, and it covers, as you say, not just premises. It covers certainly every single individual that lives and resides in Sheffield or chooses to work here, because any one of us at any one time may want to apply for a license if it's just to extend for a particular special 60th birthday party next year, guys. So it's that sort of thing that it does reach right across every single one of us, and I can imagine the consultation threw up all sorts of different issues and comments, and I can see that you've responded to them extremely well. So I echo what Bob says. Thank you very much for the work that's gone into it. Jackie?
You're muted, Jack.
I'm sorry, I wanted to thank the licensing, thank you. I wanted to thank the licensing department for the wonderful work they do on safeguarding, specifically around that whole element of safeguarding. If you could take it back, Claire. I know they do a lot of things about helping people understand and trying to promote the, you know, everybody who has a license to think, well, it could be taxis, it could be venues, it could be all sorts of things, but they do tremendous work, our officers, in trying to get that out and ensuring everybody complies with it. So, and keeping our children and more vulnerable people safe in the city. It's really important. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Absolutely. So thank you. Can we agree the recommendation, which is also to refer it to the December council? So we'll get the opportunity to for other members to raise questions at that point. Thank you.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Right, that concludes the meeting. Yeah, I've not got anything else on my 185,000 pages. So just before I go, I do also want to take this opportunity to say that we've sort of launched a request for ideas to make our sort of 2-week festive period as special as it possibly can be, following, you know, 9 months of, you know, extremely difficult times for lots of people. So thank you to Lucy Ashton and the Star for launching it for us in the Star. But also one of the things is also to say to canvass ideas, so people give us the ideas about what the council can do. But also what I found is people are sending me, sort of John Thornton from Stannington, for example, has sent me an email about everything that they're doing in Stannington. And I know every area that all our councillors represent, there's some great things going on, whether it's just at a street level or whether it's a community level or wider than that, that we can learn what each other's doing and we can share it. So hopefully we can start getting these ideas implemented and into practice, so that hopefully, I mean, it sounds a long way off, it's several weeks away, but we need to start planning for it now, so that hopefully we can end this horrendous, horribilis, is it what Queen says, year, with at least trying to make people have a couple of festive times in the best possible way that they can. So everyone, members here, officers and members of the public out there, put your ideas forward and let us know what you're doing, and then we can share it with each other. So on that note, I will say thank you very much, and we'll see you at the next cabinet meeting, before that at the council, but at the next cabinet meeting in December. Oh, sorry, can I also say, she's gone. Lorraine. I was just about to say, Lorraine is leaving the council after many years, and I was just about to say, but I'm not sure, we'll certainly be able to do it at full council. Yes. So our cabinet will extend our you know, our thank you and all our best wishes in the normal way, but also I would also like to probably get the Lord Mayor to say something at full council. And we would like to thank her, but she's been the first to go. So thank you very much. Okay, have a nice evening.
Agreed.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.